Hello YouTubers, this is Music Sword here, and this is my review of James Bond film number 5, You Only Live Twice, released June 13th, 1967, directed by Gilbert. Film ran an hour and 57 minutes, and I'll just get out of the way, its box office gross was $116 million, which was actually pretty disappointing for the James Bond series, because you come off Goldfinger, which, one second here, I'll just quickly grab it, which grossed $124 million. You come off Thunderball, which grosses $141 million. You're thinking to yourself, well, okay, this one might not gross as much, but to decrease by over $30 million is quite a big blunder. The theme song to this was sung by Nancy Sinatra, Frank Sinatra's wife at the time, and this stars Sean Connery's James Bond, Akiko Wakabayashi as Aki, Tetsuro Tanaba as Tanaka, Teru Shimada as Mr. Asado, Karen Dorr as Helga Brandt, Donald Pleasance as Blofeld, Bernard Lee as M, and Lois Maxwell as Miss Moneypenny. And the plot to this movie is a spaceship at the beginning gets captured by this mysterious object and is just flat out swallowed up by another rocket, and the Americans instantly accuse the Russians later in the film, and that's pretty much where Bond's sent out to find out what happened to it before World War III breaks out, which, if you remember, this is during the Cold War when nuclear tensions were very, very high at this point, and it had been the theme sort of the last 3 Bond films is nuclear warfare. Like, you had Goldfinger and Atomic Device, you had Largo capturing nuclear warheads, and now you have Spaceship being taken control of, and then the threat of nuclear war. But now let's see, what are some memorable scenes by this? Bond, or at the beginning, the scene where the spaceship's taken, that's pretty memorable. At the beginning, James Bondish is in a bed, he's making love to a woman. Quickly, the bed gets folded up and shot at, and then you find out right after that he didn't die or anything, but there is a part in there where after he dies, like, they get him into the rocket and or get him onto a sub, like, they give him the funeral and all that, naval funeral and everything, and then they go and have him in the ocean, and he's in the sub, and when they let him go to go investigate, because it is a pretty big thing, like, it sort of gives him freedom now to investigate things, they shoot him out of the torpedo bay, which I thought was kind of cool at the time. Scene where he meets Tanaka is pretty cool, I guess. I like the scene where during a car chase or whatever, Tanaka comes with a helicopter with the magnet on the end, lifts up the car and drops it in the middle of the ocean. I thought that scene was pretty cool. Scene where Helga tries to kill Bond, was actually a pretty good scene. I quite enjoyed it. It's the one where he's in the plane with her after he is found out and everything, and she has him in there, and there's this little table there that slides out, which goes over his hands, and she's trying to get out. She jumps out of the plane. He's fighting, scrambling to get out, trying to get out, let me out, and trying to scramble. He eventually gets his hand free. Judo chop! As Austin Powers would say, right to the table, breaks it, gets out of the plane before it blows up and all that. And then you have the infamous scene of him in a small plane-like glider. I know it's sort of like a plane, but whatever. I didn't really remember too much of this film, and I'll get more to that later, like from memory, but going back watching it, I remember why. I didn't remember too much of this film. Spectre's underground lair was quite extensive, and it was one I think it was actually built at Pinewood Studios. It was actually constructed, and it was pretty huge. Think about it. Then they have the scene where they feed Helga to the piranhas, which Blofeld explained, and which really brought Blofeld back into the equation, that he'd been sort of teased since From Russia with Love. And then from Goldfinger, you never heard about him, but from Thunderball, he was being teased, and this time you actually get to meet him. One of the absolute weirdest things I'll ever say about this is, why the fuck would they try and turn James Bond Japanese? So I got written down here, Japanese Bond, what the fuck? But then you get to the assault on the underground base, which is pretty self-explanatory. That was a pretty big scene. That took up probably 20 minutes, or 25 minutes of the movie is actually taken up in that assault on the base. Bond meets Blofeld, which you actually get Blofeld unmasked, and you actually see him in this film, which is pretty good. And one thing I will say is the fighting scene in this is very intense. More intense than Goldfinger. I believe more intense than Thunderball, in my opinion. It was just very intense. And at the end, Blofeld escapes and blows up the base. Now, I don't know. Now, where to go with this film? What's my thoughts and opinions on this? Out of the first 5 movies, this one absolutely shit the bed. It was a bad movie. And I know I've gone back, and I sort of consider it the year it was in. Everyone says, like, oh, well, we'll go back and watch these movies and what was coming out that year, but what it came out previous, was it actually all that bad as to today's standards? And even back then, you can tell by $30 million walking out the door, there wasn't that much happiness about this. It was a bad movie. I know they're going off the Ian Fleming book, but I thought this could have been done so much better, turning Bond Japanese. Not only the fact they turned Bond Japanese, there was not one hot Bond girl in this film at all. Like, you're talking Bond girls, you're coming off of Domino, who's one of the hottest Bond girls ever. You even have Pussy Galore, Honey Wilder, even Anya from Russia with Love, and even the one after this is better. I know 1967 and they're going Asian and all that, but to me, it just, not one of these girls really appealed to me in this movie. They might say, oh, you're just watching it for women. No, I'm not. I'm watching these films, and you got all sorts of the Bond girls in there. Even in a lot of stuff is you don't see any Bond girl from You Only Live Twice. What's my great, and yeah, before I even get to that, like the fact, I remember watching this movie when I was 8 and liking it a bit, I remember watching this movie as 8, and actually, even as an 8-year-old, knowing that was a bad movie. And then I watched it last year. Like, I went through a Bond-a-thon where I watched every James Bond movie, and I just couldn't get into this movie at all. It was just, it had its moments. Like, I'll even show you from right here to the bottom of the page is memorable scenes from the movie. From here to about there plus is from the next movie, and that's multiple sides and all that. That shows like there was not much really going for it, and it signified a change, which I'll get into in my next video. But if I had to give this thing a grade, I don't know. I'll give it a D. And I think that's a good grade for it. Maybe a C minus, but C minus D. This was a hard Bond movie to get into. I think I'm going to do a video of my 5 best Bond movies, 5 worst Bond movies. I think 5 best Bond villains of all time, and maybe even my top 5 Bond girls. But if you're thinking You Only Live Twice, stay away from that movie like the plague. Just stay away from it. It's bad. But there are people out there that'll like it. I'll give them that. This is just my opinion. I'm not saying that that it's fact or anything. It's just my personal opinion on this movie. It's a bad movie. And so yeah, that's my review of You Only Live Twice, James Bond 1967 release. Hopefully, and I did watch it, yes, the next movie's better. But this is Music Horror. Peace.